And today I'm going to follow up on when I did the sermon about Halloween. And before y'all get mad at everything, there's a reason for it. And I promise you that I will, unless God says otherwise, I will not talk about this subject again until next year when it comes around. But the reason why I want to follow up on this, because after I did that sermon, I come across a video on YouTube of a guy who's a Christian, who I have endorsed in this church before. If y'all want to know who, I'll tell you. Come to me after service and I'll tell you. I still stand behind the stuff that I've talked about before that I've used of his. But he said in a video, well, first of all, it's bad enough when you hear a Christian says that the church and the world needs to compromise on something. If you hear that from a Christian, you don't need to be listening to that Christian about godly things if they think the church and the world needs to compromise. What really disturbed me is that he didn't say that. He said that the church itself needs to compromise on those who don't want to participate in Halloween and those who think it's just fun, let us have our fun, it's okay. And he literally said this. He said there's nothing wrong on October the 31st dressing up and going to houses and getting candy. You're not going to invoke something demonic. I want to tell you why that I believe that is completely false. And then you can make up your own mind when it comes around October the 31st if you're going to participate in trick-or-treating or not and doing all this. With that said, I'm not saying that your kids and grandkids cannot dress up and have fun. In fact, I don't believe there's nothing wrong of us maybe one day having a costume party here and dressing up as superheroes and things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about dressing, that we can't have all fun. As Christians, what I'm talking about is the actual act of dressing up on October the 31st and going trick-or-treating, why that is not something you need to participate in. So I'm going to get a little deeper in this than I did last time. It was a pagan belief that is still believed today. That where we get Halloween from, it was once called All Hallows Eve. That the realm of the living and the realm of the spiritual was at its closest. Evil spirits and even the spirits of people who have passed on the dead could come back to the realm of the living. Come back here. They would rise up from their graves and leave the cemeteries and graveyards and go back to familiar territory. So they actually had people who would actually, on this day, and this is all pagan now. You have to remember this. This wasn't done by Christians. This was all pagan, a pagan belief. They would have people, and think about this, they would put on disguises on October the 31st so the dead would not recognize them as being living beings and would go to home trying to incite these spirits to follow them and try to take them out of town or back to the cemeteries. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere around along the line, apparently some of them didn't take it as serious as their forefathers and decided they needed a reward for doing this. And this is when they started announcing themselves that it was give us a reward or we would not encourage the evil spirits to follow us this year. This is where we get the act of trick-or-treating from. And so to say that it is okay to do this, it doesn't matter if you're dressing up as a ghoul, a goblin, or a princess, or a ninja turtle, Wayne. If you do it on that day, if you dress up to disguise yourself and go house to house asking for a treat, a reward, no matter what your intentions are, you are still acting out this pagan tradition. And to say that you will not invoke something is playing Russian roulette with your soul. Maybe it won't, but how can you say for certain that it won't or will? You're taking your spiritual soul into your own hands and saying and mocking God by doing it. So let's once again, let's go to Deuteronomy 18, verses 10 and 11. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire. I said it the last time. I said that's human sacrifices. Or the use of divinations. This is what I'm going to do different than the last time. I want to tell you what these words mean. Divinations, the practice of rituals to gain knowledge. Kind of sounds like a little bit like fortune tellers, don't it? These fortune tellers on the road, or maybe trying to the word astrologers, trying to look up, your horoscope. So where I'm trying to look horoscope, trying to go through rituals to gain knowledge. Instead of just asking God to give you the knowledge that you need, you're trying to get it for yourself from the spiritual world. Divinations, or the observer of times, someone who argues what's supposed to happen. Someone who is arguing with you with something to happen. They try to look, they call it looking at omens. Looking at omens. So all these ancient religions used to do, they like, oh, I saw a bird flying through the sky, so this is what the gods were trying to tell me. Looking at omens, trying to argue what will happen. An enchanter uses magic or sorcery. That's a definition. I don't see the difference between magic and sorcery. It's doing spells. Or a witch. When you look up witch, there's a lot of definitions that comes under that. Which I believe when it's saying here in the Bible, in this verse, when it's talking about witch, it's talking about a female who is trying to use supernatural powers to cause harm to others. So, a witch. And do you know that's the number one most popular costume during Halloween for a female is a witch. And here it's saying it shouldn't be found among you. So why does a Christian want to dress up as something that God is saying it shouldn't be found among you in the first place? A charmer, someone who casts spells. Someone who consults with familiar spirits. The actual definition, if you Google familiar spirits or trying to consult with familiar spirits, is a spirit guide that is under the control of Satan. But people still think there's nothing wrong with going to all these fortune tellers. And where do you think they're getting their information from? They can claim all day long, these so-called mediums and fortune tellers, well, God gave me this gift. You know what we call someone who contributes something of God? Something evil to God? I learned this recently. It's called apostate. It don't sound good, does it? It just sounds nasty, but we call them apostate. It's when someone is doing something evil and claiming it's from God. That's all they're doing. God says it shouldn't be found among you. You shouldn't be talking to these familiar spirits. They're under control of Satan himself, the devil, and you're saying, oh, but God gave me the gift to talk to him. A wizard. Once again, it's a male that does magic. I believe that it's really, in the Bible when it says wizard, it's just talking about a male witch. Nowadays, they call them warlocks because they want to make a difference between witches and wizards, because supposedly a wizard can be a good thing. If you look at a lot of the books and movies of the day, a wizard can be good or evil. It's all according to how they use their magic. No, as I said, it all comes from the same source. God doesn't grant these spiritual gifts. The devil does it to mock God. And then it says necromancer. A necromancer. And this is where I really want to get to today. A necromancer, the definition is someone who communicates with the dead. A communicator with the dead. What were these pagans doing when they were going house to house, dressed up in costumes, doing? They were trying to communicate with dead spirits. They were performing the act of necromancy, trying to get them to follow them around. Now, do you see the danger of doing this today? Because I guarantee you that nobody who goes trick-or-treating today goes back to a cemetery like they did. Oh, follow me back. You're going back home. What do you know might follow you or not? Oh, it's all harmless. It's all harmless. It's all in fun. So did the person who went swimming in ankle, knee-high deep water in the ocean and got shark attacked. Oh, you can't get harmed. It's in the deep water where you get harmed. This is harmless. Most shark attacks happen in shallow water on humans, not deep water. And it's the same thing when you play with this. You don't have to get deep into this occulted stuff to get burned by it. It's when you play around with it and think it's harmless is when it follows you home. I remember a story of a guy who was literally one of these fake little ghost hunters. He literally participated in a show. They went to places supposedly haunted, and they try to get information, try to get whatever's there to talk to them. He said the entire show was faked, but once. He said he brought a demon home with him. And he didn't even believe. He wasn't a Christian. He didn't believe in the supernatural. It was all one big joke just to make money and to get on TV. And he said his wife literally left him because you brought a demon home with you. And every time you leave the house, I get attacked because I'm associated with you through marriage. You still want to take your kids trick-or-treating? So I got to thinking about it. Well, what if somebody comes up to me and says, well, you're saying I can't communicate with this stuff. It's saying, oh, it's an abomination. But then God communicated with the devil and Job. He had a conversation with him. Let me tell you the difference between God communicating with the devil and you trying to communicate with the devil. You're not God. Whether we like it or not, God is the creator of everything, even Lucifer, and he's under God's control. And God, he sets the standards and he sets the limits, and he set a limit to us. We are not to communicate with evil spirits. You can rebuke them all day long. Well, Clay, what's the difference between rebuking an evil spirit and communicating with them? Rebuking is showing disgust. Communicating is sharing information. You can tell them to get lost all day long. I take you to Matthew. Let me take you to Matthew. Chapter 17, verse 18. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. I take you to Luke. I take you to Luke chapter 4, verse 35. And Jesus rebuked him, saying, hold thy peace, and come out of him. And when the devil had thrown him in the midst, he came out of him and hurt him not. I take you to Jude. Yeah, we hopping around a lot today. Jude, verse 9. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, thus not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. You are encouraged to rebuke. There's examples of Jesus rebuking them. There's examples of God rebuking them. There's an example here of the Michael archangel rebuking them. But guess what? Michael archangel didn't have a conversation with him. He rebuked him. He didn't have a conversation with him. You can tell the devil and his demons to get lost, hit the road. That song, Hit the Road, Jack. Hit the road, Satan. But you are not to communicate with him. You are not God. So, I'm not going to talk very long because I've already started shouting, and I don't like shouting. And plus, I just like Zach, I'm dealing with this too, and I have a sore throat, and I won't be able to talk this evening if I keep shouting. Don't matter how many cough drops I eat. But I want to take you to Philippians. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. I just don't want to leave you with a bunch of stuff you can't do, a bunch of stuff you ain't supposed to be looking at, a bunch of stuff you ain't supposed to be thinking about. Let's read some good stuff now. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and there be any praise, think on these things. So I ask you, when you go to the stores and look at all the decorations for Halloween, how much of it looks like this? Looks like these things that I just read about. I don't see much of nothing. Believe me, I know. I work in retail. You don't see much of nothing that looks like this. So we're not to think on them things, but think on these. We shouldn't be participating in it. How much of that so-called harmless traditions, harmless holiday looks like this? I don't see much. In fact, it looks more like a bunch of occult symbols. Something that an occultist would love to have around their house. So why do we see Christians buying it up as soon as it hits the shelves? I'm going to leave you with a quote. I'm not going to just use the Bible to make my point. I'm going to leave you with a quote from an actor called Christopher Lee. He made his whole career on first making movies about the occult. He played Dracula in a bunch of B movies. And because of that, in an interview, he said he did meet a lot of Satanists. He did meet a lot of people who practice black magic. He did get involved in the occult. This is what he had to say about it. I quote, I'll even do his little hand gestures. He says, never, 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 you will lose your mind as well as your soul. You have to ask your question. Ask this question to yourself. Is any of that worth it? Is fitting in because everybody else does it and thinks it's okay, worth it? I don't think so. They can make fun of me. They can not like me. They can not watch this on YouTube all they want to. Doesn't change the fact that I have made up my mind. It's mine and my house. My future wife, if I'm allowed to have one, of my future kids, if I'm allowed to have one, will not participate in anything that will harm their souls. I will not allow it. And if that makes me a toxic male, I will accept it. Because in the end, I'm going to serve the Lord.